I'm going to talk about not my favourite haunted place, because everyone knows that's Dinever, obviously, where I work part time. But there was a place that I visited in the early 90s with some friends, and it was Exminster Hospital near Exeter. I put a post up. If you scroll through my timeline, you'll see there is a little highwayman, little haunted object that I don't think's possessed. I think just something with it. And it got me thinking about another haunted object that I had in my house. That basically, as soon as it came to my house, I wanted to get it the fuck out. So I'm going to tell you the story of what that was in the end. But where it came from. And where it came from was this old asylum just in Devon, just outside Exeter, called Exminster Hospital. Now, at the time, I was living in London and I was visiting my friends that lived in Exeter, Nikki, Lucy, Lisa. And we decided, because they said it was cool as fuck, we decided to go and explore this abandoned asylum. A lot of our friends had been there. They'd done photo shoots with their bands there. It was cool as fuck. It looked like a proper like Victorian institution, quite sinister. When you got there, because there was nothing else around, the air seemed still, the wind didn't seem to blow. It was one of those places that probably coincidentally the atmosphere around the place was strange. Now, as soon as we entered through what would have been the kitchen area, so where the staff would have been working, where there wouldn't have been any patients, and we didn't notice anything odd there, just like it was basically an industrial kitchen that had probably been modernised at some point, maybe during the 70s or 80s. And so we were walking through there, but the next stop from that, we went across some corridors and went to this ballroom. Obviously, the ballroom would have been where all the residents of this asylum gathered to maybe have fun, to sing, to watch shows, or have fun basically. And the atmosphere in this area totally changed. It was. It felt like I'm getting a shiver up my spine just telling you about that. So yeah, you went in, and it felt like you were being watched. I can't explain it. You just felt eyes around the room watching you. And Lisa and Lucy started doing some kind of weird performance in there. And then the atmosphere really changed. It felt like we weren't wanted in that place at all. Bearing in mind, this asylum would have housed people with severe mental illnesses, probably in the Victorian age, ladies that had got pregnant, because they were classed as mentally ill and insane. All kinds of people during its lifetime. So, from the severe mental illnesses to people that were wrongly incarcerated in there for just having unfortunate problems in life, So very strange atmosphere anyway. It felt like we were being watched, and really felt like whatever the energy was there in that room, it didn't want us in there. We didn't leave, we pressed on. So Nikki and I decided to go and have a lovely explore of this place. And Lisa and Lucy went off to another part of the building. And I remember a few of my friends in Exeter saying they picked up some really cool things from there, actually. Some things like Bibles, because along this corridor there was all these little compartments, like probably solitary confinement places. And in there, the floor was littered with hundreds of Bibles. Dave Goodchild, who runs the cavern, he had some really, really cool x-rays that he'd taken from the place. They were really random things though, like there was an x-ray of a patient whose neck was at right angles, so that was their neck, that was their head. I'm assuming they were dead. They had their self x-rayed, because I don't know anyone that could survive a right angle sort of joint in their spine, but I remember that x-ray in particular. And I wanted to get some cool art because I was interested in really even more weird shit than I am now. So I thought if we could find some cool x-rays, that would be awesome. So Nikki and I headed for this x-ray room, and we were looking through all these logbooks that were just, everything was just tossed around. There was hardly anything left in there, but the things that were just tossed around. We were looking through these logbooks from like the 1970s, early 80s in this x-ray room of people that have been x-rayed. And a lot of people seem to have chest x-rays, which started worrying us a little bit, because the reason why loads of people might have a chest x-ray in a building of that age is if there's asbestos present in the building. And obviously we were casually walking through the place, disturbing all the dust and probably kicking up a lot of the asbestos that had settled, and maybe that's why it was abandoned. Maybe it was considered, unfit for health, so it had been abandoned. But yeah, pages and pages of chest x-rays. And as we were both looking down separately at these books, I saw what I thought in the corner of my eye, to the sort of right of me, I saw a figure in the doorway. And I shat myself, not literally, you'll be glad to know, but I literally thought that there was a homeless person or, some kind of vagrant living in this abandoned building, which probably could happen, and I sort of looked over in that direction, and Nikki went, "What the fuck was that?" And we both looked at this empty doorway. There was nothing in the doorway. And as we did, we felt something rush past us. It was really weird. It was like a person, but it wasn't a person, it was a shadow. So we both ran out into this corridor, and we heard this noise that I can't really work out what it was. Now, this was like, you're talking 30-ish years ago. So it's still quite vivid in my mind, though. The noise wasn't pigeons flapping off. It was more like a sort of weird kind of muffled sort of noise. That was a really shit impression, sorry. But that's what we heard in the corridor. And we both looked at each other and were sort of like, oh shit, what was that? And then we decided to leave that area. And so we carried on walking. We got to where the entrance to one of the wards would be. I caught up with Lisa and Lucy. It was kind of a cross section of the corridor. So the nurse's office was in this cross section. So obviously the nurse could see all down these corridors. They could see into the ward. They could see what was happening in the corridors. And there was like loads of discarded sort of medicine. As you looked into the ward, it was a bit like that scene from my favourite Hellraiser film, Hellbound, where Dr. Chenard comes, all the mattresses were lined up on the wall, propped up against the wall, mouldy. Who knows what's happened on there? But if your mind wanders like mine does, yes, don't think about Dr. Chenard is all I can say. Anyway, so all these were propped up, and I was in the nurse's office when suddenly from around me, I felt like this rushing of air, really weird, sort of breathing around me, like watching me. It was quite horrific, actually. And they were like, oh, come in the ward. And I was like, I can't move. And literally felt pressure that if I stepped forward, there would be even more pressure. So something was sort of pushing me away from that area. And at that time, I just thought, oh, shit, I've had enough, right? And I kind of ran out the building and jumped out a window as far as I remember. But that was quite horrific, actually. Now, as we were walking around earlier on, before all this happened, we'd come to the corridor that I mentioned just now, that Bibles just sort of chucked on the floor, quite, loads of them in each room, hundreds of Bibles. And in this one area, there was this really completely cool wire torso. It was kind of like the sort of 1940s, 1950s sort of torso that you might display pants and vest on in the shop, ladies' brassiere might be on it in the shop window or on a desk in a shop. But I thought that was really, really cool. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll have that. So we took it out of the building, and when a few months later, my brother brought it up, because my brother Paul used to come and live with me at the weekends in London. He brought some of my stuff that I'd been in Exeter up, and in a bin bag. He dumped these 2 bin bags in my living room, And immediately he brought them in, there was this really strange energy in the house. It was as if, I can only describe it as if somebody had had an argument in the room. Do you know, like when you walk into a room after a couple have been arguing and you can tell something's wrong? They're not talking to each other, but there's an atmosphere. So as soon as he brought these bin bags up to the living room, it was like that. And oh God, there's something here that we shouldn't have. And I looked through the first bin bag, just things like photo albums, books, albums, etc. Nothing in there. I opened the second bin bag. On the top was this wire torso. And I was like, oh, it's this. I don't want this in this house. And so I lobbed it out the window. As you do. So my flat in Wickham Road, I don't know who the garden belonged to. We were on the first floor. I just tossed it out the window into whoever was below's garden. Sorry about that. But yeah, chucked it out the house and the atmosphere was fine again. So that was a lesson to me, not to bring things into the house that don't belong, that have got some kind of energy attached to them, and you've got them from somewhere that hasn't got a nice sort of positive energy in. And incidentally, if you do want to get rid of some shit energy in your house, obviously, first of all, identify what the object is. If it's of sentimental value, I'm afraid you're a bit fucked, really, if you want to keep it. But if it's not sentimental, just chuck it out. And you can smudge your house with sage, which is when you burn a bundle of sage, go around all the corners with the smoke and just clean the energy. You can burn frankincense, which cleanses the energy, and that sort of thing. Oh yeah, as a PS to this story, it was made into flats like in the 90s, and I think it was Nikki that had met somebody that lived in one of the flats. Very nice flats apparently, but fucking haunted. So there we are. If you live in one of those flats in the old Exminster Hospital, drop me a message. I'll be interested to know if you have any strange energy. So that is my little tale of the worst, horriblest, most haunted place I've ever been, and it was horrible. Bye for now.